The world's on fire. Our river's gone dry. The rich are getting richer. They've left us out here to die. Mass migration. We got no place to hide. Who's against us? Who's on our side? Are they too dumb or are they just in on it? Liars and cheaters, a red-hot grip. Ditch the gaslighting gas bag that speaks in code. He's a faker, a shaker, a pontificating pantload. In this house of mirrors, we've hit the wall before it's too late. Let's go. Come on, y'all. It's border to border and coast to coast. It's real, it's facts, and it ain't no hoax. It's Podcast by George, and it's showtime, folks. Well, hello, hi, how are you? Welcome on in to another podcast by George. That's what I call my drama intro. And I don't know how the times could be any more dramatic. You know, I said after that attack on Israel and the response in Gaza, I said this could go sideways and kill us all. I tell people that today and they still look at me kind of weird, like, kill us all? What the hell are you talking about? Well, let me show you what I'm talking about here. Let me take a look at this here. Bring this up on screen. I don't know if you saw this or not, but this is an Israeli minister. This guy's the heritage minister. He was suspended after calling for the nuking of Gaza as an option. Now, there's a couple of things about this just in the header. He was suspended. That doesn't mean that it isn't still an option. That doesn't mean that there aren't a lot of people still in Israeli government that consider this a realistic option. The other part about it is, if you follow my podcast or if you follow science, they tell us that nuclear bomb detonation, maybe depending upon the size of it and where it's launched and that type of thing, can end it all. I mean, this thing could put a cloud, a dust cloud, probably not fallout, but dust into the atmosphere that could do to us what was done to the dinosaurs. You know, no sun, no photosynthesis, no earth. I mean, and this guy is telling people that it's an option. And then you think, well, that's just talk. No, it ain't. Look at this. In a rare announcement, the U.S. says guided missile submarines have arrived in the Middle East, at least one anyway. A guided missile sub has arrived in the Middle East, a message of deterrence to adversaries. My God. Again, what could go wrong? If you look at what's happening now in the Middle East, you look at humanity around the globe, you look at how dumb we are either on purpose or accidentally, and we could launch a strike, a missile from a submarine that could be responded to, again, end it all. But that's just where I wanted to start here today, because we're going to get to the great Stephen Semler is our guest today. I hope you saw the promo. This is what it looked like. Blood on our hands. And there's Stephen. But on the other side of Stephen there, that's the photo from the congressional hearing with Antony Blinken there. You might see him. And one of the greatest graphics, one of the greatest actions that I've ever seen from Code Pink, and they do a bunch of them. But that's mostly Code Pink folks, including Medea Benjamin back there with red painted hands, blood on their hands. And that's who we are. That's what we're doing. We're funding this. So let's get to the live line graphic here and introduce our guest. Stephen Semler is the co-founder of SPRI, Security Policy Reform Institute. He follows the money on U.S. foreign and domestic policy topics. He writes for working class grassroots organizers. And you can learn more about Stephen Semler and the Security Policy Reform Institute at securityreform.org. And you can follow Stephen on Twitter at Stephen Semler. And it's Stephen with a PH, STEPHENSEMLER. And with any luck today, maybe we'll show a couple of things that he's been doing on Twitter. But let me take this away, click a button over here, and say good morning to our good buddy, our good pal here, Stephen Semler. Hi, Stephen.
Hey, George. Good to be with you.
Hey, thanks for coming on here. And one of the genesis is, and you're the guy, you're the numbers guy, you're the graph, the chart guy. Here is some of the latest information, live updates. Israeli troops have surrounded Gaza City. They've supposedly separated the city north and south. And then this, just an hour or two ago, the Israeli military splitting Gaza in two, Palestinian death toll now exceeding 10,000. And you wrote a piece, and Jacobin here that I wanted to get to, and it reads the U.S. is poised to send more military aid to Israel on top of the billions it gives annually already. I mean, yeah, they're one of the most assisted, subsidized, underwritten, supported foreign nations, obviously, in the history of the United States. But yeah, we're going to do some more. Israel's all out assault on Gaza will not bring back the Israeli lives lost October 7th, writes Stephen. And it's already killing countless Palestinian civilians. Well, they can count them, and it looks like it's just over 10,000. Biden says we stand with Israel and we'll make sure it has what it needs to take care of its citizens, defend itself, respond to its attack. The sentiment is understandable given the horror of the Hamas massacre on October 7th. Yeah, I mean, you can understand the sentiment, but my God, when is enough enough? Stephen writes, yet bombing Gaza, a heavily blockaded, densely populated strip of land where military precision is impossible. And the civilian casualties are unavoidable. They're not making the situation any better, and it's not going to punish the perpetrators of the October 7 attacks. And I think that's been borne out as well, but I want to put that away because I want to get Stephen to comment on all of this. I think one of the most important things that you've made a point of there, Stephen, because a lot of this is an eye for an eye stuff, although I said on my show that Israel has a blood bucket full of eyeballs because it's about 10-1 right now, the casualty count, Israel to Palestinian. But that ain't bringing any of these people back. That's not going to solve anything. What do you tell us more about that?
No, you're exactly right. It won't solve anything. But this is just standard practice for modern Israel as it is today. I mean, it's essentially not interested in solving any root causes or actually delivering on justice. It's about just actuating as much force as possible. And part of it's performative, part of it's theatrical, for the politicians to play to their base. But at the same time, I mean, settler colonial states are always interested, when they're challenged militarily by the people they occupy or the people they colonize. They always answer with, I mean, throughout history, they always answer with essentially mass extermination, and that's what we're seeing now, which is why the fatalities numbers are so out of balance, and it's just going to grow. I mean, you said it's 10-1. That's about right, compared to like what Air Wars, this group from the UK, is saying, what the UN is saying, what the State Department is saying. I mean, they all pretty much agree on the fatality numbers, and it's going to keep growing. We're probably going to hit 20-1 soon.
Jesus. Let me read this a little bit more of this Jacobin article, and I encourage everybody to go there and check it out. Stephen's a frequent contributor to Jacobin, and he puts this in statistical, factual context. I mean, he's not throwing bombs or flame throwing in here. I mean, trying to piss people off. I mean, this stuff is reality. Israel is the largest cumulative beneficiary of U.S. foreign assistance since World War II, from 1946 through September 2023. Israel received a total of nearly $160 billion in U.S. economic and military support. So we're going to talk about billions. Sometimes on my show, Stephen, we talk about trillions. I try to illustrate that. But $1 billion is a stack of dollar bills 67 miles high. That's how much $1 billion is. It's a million. It's 1,000 millions. I mean, you can't get your arms around this. And we've done, what do we got? 160 billion in U.S. economic and military support. Economic aid makes up about 20% of that figure, but its share is shrinking. The United States began to phase out the assistance after Israel became an advanced economy. Yeah, they're doing all right over there. Large-scale U.S. subsidies beginning in 1971 first stabilized Israel's economy, then catalyzed its rapid economic growth, including the expansion of its high-tech sector in the 1990s up until about 2008. And as of 2022, the country's GDP per capita ranks 14th worldwide. Yeah, in a lot of respects, Israel's doing better. There's a couple of things people aren't aware of. They have Medicare for all over there, Stephen. I brought that up on my show. They take care of the healthcare needs of their people. And then I know a lot of the feminists in this country in particular are dialed into that abortion issue. My wife likes to remind me that Israel has abortion on demand. In a lot of respects, socially and economically, Israel's doing fine.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the reason why the U.S. decided to phase out economic aid, because they decided it's not necessary. But at the same time, as they were phasing out economic aid, they were increasing military aid. And
Mm.
but if you apply the same logic as they did to the economic sector, which is Israel became an advanced economy, therefore they don't need aid, the same logic should be applied to their military sector. Despite setting aside, for example, there are countless human rights abuses, which should disqualify it for military aid anyway. But from just a material standpoint, they're already the 15th highest spender worldwide in terms of military spending. So I don't see why they're in the top 15 in terms of GDP per capita and also the top 15 in military spending, but somehow they still get tons of military aid from the United States. Aside from the Ukraine, Israel's second in terms of
Yeah.
annual military aid.
All right, and of course, Stephen. I mean, he's known as the charts and graphs guy. I mean, take a look at this. This is Israel accepting $159 billion in U.S. military and economic aid. Every word means something. I look very closely at these types of things. Look at the chart. Look at what we're talking about: economic versus military. There. The other thing is, Stephen, this wording: Israel accepted $159 billion. Yeah, they accepted it. I mean, they could have turned it away. They could have done some other thing. But there's some quid pro quo in here. I mean, they're wanting some things. They're also giving some things. And one thing that they're really vested in, a lot of people don't realize this, don't think about it. And Noam Chomsky talks about this a lot. Everybody was bitching and going crazy about Russians in our election and Russiagate and all that type of thing. Israel is really involved in American politics. They've got great control about what goes on over here, and that's all part of this too.
That's exactly right. Sometimes people conflate the Zionist lobby with Jewish faith groups, and that's not correct. But you're right. I mean, the Zionist lobby isn't necessarily related to Jewish faith at all. In fact, it sort of just exploits the fact that Israel's flag has the Star of David on it. When in fact, I mean, it's really the Zionist lobby it really allies itself with the most conservative leaning forces in the U.S., including Christian Zionists, who many of whom are anti-Semitic. So it's a political organization designed to crush any sort of progressive notions or any sort of left-leaning politics in the United States, because if you let the left have too much power, it's going to start more pressure is going to mount on conditioning U.S. military aid and other U.S. assistance to Israel based on human rights, based on shared values, and frankly, if you elect the right leftists to office, it's going to start conditioning it on common sense, and in that sense, then Israel would be disqualified from U.S. largesse.
Yeah, common sense is sorely missing here. Let me bring this back up on screen to continue here. There is another problem. Sending an additional U.S. military aid package to Israel should be illegal. Now, I hadn't thought about this. I was not aware of this at all. Tell us what you mean by the fact that it should be, anyway, illegal.
Yeah, I mean, this article that you brought up here is just me making the most plainly stated, dispassionate argument I can, even though I feel incredibly passionate about the Palestinian cause and Israeli human rights abuses from just my past. But what I'm essentially saying is that it should be illegal for the U.S. to send weapons to Israel based on existing U.S. human rights law. And there's 3 laws that are relevant here that essentially govern not just military aid to Israel, but all foreign military aid. And that's the Foreign Assistance Act, the Arms Export Control Act, and the Leahy laws. And all of those combined essentially say, look, if a country has a demonstrated pattern of human rights abuses, we can't sell to them. And if it's clear that the weapons, or if we have enough signs that the weapons that they will receive will not be used for legitimate self-defense, then we can't give the weapons to them. So it's clear that Israel is not using it for legitimate self-defense reasons. It's on the offensive by nature. As the colonizer, it's always on the offensive, and they have a demonstrated pattern of human rights abuses. They bombed Al Jazeera's and the AP news organization buildings in Gaza in 2021, along with hospitals and schools. They're doing the exact same thing in 2023. Yeah. So what I'm saying is that essentially for like the question of should we or shouldn't we condition military aid to Israel? It's we have to condition military aid to Israel if we want to follow the law. So I don't really care what Joe Biden or any other member of Congress thinks about Israel, and I don't really care to really change their minds because I don't think we can really. But so the question really should be: we just want these people to uphold the law. It's very, very simple, and it's the same with the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement. It's like you can protest that all you want, but if you try to crack down on it, you will violate the First Amendment.
Yes.
So it's just follow the law when it comes to this. So I feel really passionate about it, but what I'm saying is just please just uphold the law. That's really what's at stake here.
Well, and you don't have to be a savant. I mean, you don't have to be a historical scholar to figure this stuff out. For me, for instance, I've got a little Rosetta Stone with this, and it was Shireen Abu Akleh. I mean, that Palestinian journalist that was killed by that Israeli sniper in the Jenin camp, refugee camp over there. My God, I mean, there's no two ways to look at that. I'm a journalist by background, by training and education, and I mean, I will never forget that. That is my Rosetta Stone. Let's wrap up this article here. Stephen says on the question of U.S. military aid to Israel, it shouldn't matter what affection Congress or Biden have for the country. And that's got a lot to do with this. Stephen, it doesn't have to, and I talk about this all the time on my show. Don't care what you think. Don't care what you feel. Don't care what you believe. Let's talk about what we know. And that's the world that you live in. And that's really what Security Policy Reform Institute, your sites, your Substack, and your Twitter feed are all about. I mean, this stuff is substantive fact that we're talking about here.
Exactly. I'm just trying to plainly state a case here. And I should add that, I wrap up the article saying that, the military aid that the U.S. gives Israel effectively gives them the green light. It does so in two ways.
Yeah.
I would say materially, obviously, because you just get Israel was getting weapons that they can then use to continue or intensify or otherwise sustain their military operation for an indefinite period of time. The other way is that because the United States has to break its own human rights law in order to give Israel these weapons, Israel knows that human rights obviously aren't a priority for the United States in this case, because if they're willing to violate their own domestic laws when it comes to human rights, it's not going to mind if Israel violates international human rights laws for its own military offensive. So it sends a message politically as well as providing, just basic material means as well.
A comment here coming in. We got some folks that want to comment. That's a little bit off topic, but it is significant politically in this country. Brenda says, who cares about what Joe Biden thinks? He's not even doing anything about keeping us safe. She talks about the border here. Well, these things are cumulative. I mean, all of these things, people that are sniping at Biden that don't like him for a lot of things, there's a straw that breaks the camel's back for some people. And the situation in Gaza may be it. And it's reflected in the most recent polling, I think in the 5 swing states that are being followed right now. Trump's winning, and he's on trial today. He's going to testify in his fraud case in New York State. My God, this is what we have to choose from in this country. So I want to thank Brenda for bringing that point up. But here's another kind of a chart, kind of a graph here. This is how Biden's $106 billion plan that he's proposed funds ethnic cleansing. A lot of people think that that's hyperbole, but you saw the comments that I put up there earlier. I mean, this isn't me saying this or Stephen saying this. Hell, this comes from Israel, basically. But talk about this page, Stephen.
Sure. So this is basically this $106 billion plan, and the quotes that you see in this chart and the amounts that you see listed, those all come from the president's formal request to Congress. So the president proposes, the Congress disposes. So with any sort of spending thing, it originates, or most, I should say, most spending requests originate from the White House, and they get sent to Congress, and then they get put together as a bill. So essentially, by analyzing Biden's budget documents here, I say, look, this guy is clearly anticipating or budgeting for the mass ethnic cleansing of Palestinians in Gaza, meaning that there's going to be, not just a lot of deaths as there are now, but even more, and then permanent mass displacement. And that's what you see here. You see billions of dollars allocated to programming for humanitarian and migration requirements outside of Israel and the West Bank. So essentially, the problem, as I see it, is that if they were not interested in mass displacement, they would allow Palestinians into Israel. All the funding would be to essentially repair and rebuild the infrastructure damaged in Gaza and in the West Bank, because it's Palestinian territory after all. And they'd also have, corridors to East Jerusalem as well, because it's their land. So just because Biden budgeted for it doesn't mean it's going to say it, but it aligns really closely with Israeli leadership discourse, where they say they want to shrink Gaza, they want to outright eliminate it, and they're essentially talking about real estate and their future plans. They're talking about actually controlling Gaza. And all the signs point from Israeli leadership. There's reports coming from the Israeli political establishment that they're planning on just erasing the population there and taking it over. Now, the Biden administration, to be sure, has said that it won't tolerate, or it's not supportive of any mass displacement going on, but its budget says otherwise. So until we see, and they're supporting Israel at every turn. So they're condemning Israel on, or they're not condemning Israel, but they say, oh, we don't like, civilian casualties, but they're not doing anything to stop it. So I don't really take what they say seriously until I see the money moving elsewhere. And I haven't seen the money moving elsewhere. It's just all about arming Israel, allowing them to carry out this operation. And I see even good aid, like, who doesn't like refugee aid? Who doesn't like humanitarian aid? I see that as part of a larger political project of resettling forcibly displacing Palestinians outside of Gaza. So that's my read on it.
Well, yeah, and I talk all the time on my show about the house of mirrors that we live in. Like, you can talk all you want to about humanitarian assistance and helping refugees, but my God, you're creating them with this money and with this weaponry and with this gross militarism. And some of this has to do with what we're seeing on Twitter. Now, I think you reposted this. Vice President Kamala Harris. Today, I met with Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, to discuss the urgent need to increase humanitarian aid to civilians in Gaza. And you pulled this quote out that says, I'm working hard to find a solution to a problem I help worsen every day. I mean, my God, that's, if you want to really do something here, get to the root cause of this, go upstream, as the great Suzanne Murphy says on my show. I've had her on. She said, that's what we need to do here. And I thought this was made the point very well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just, I tried to add a little bit of levity here, but I mean, essentially what the Biden administration is doing is that it's seeing the political backlash it's getting, and they're saying, oh, this is just a messaging problem. We just need to talk more about Palestinians. We need to talk about minimizing civilian casualties without actually changing their behavior. No, the millions of people are out in the streets because they don't like your behavior. They don't like your policies. They're asking for substantive change. They're not asking for more tweets about Palestinians. They know about the Palestinian plight. That's why they're out in the streets. But they realize it's because of the U.S.'s actions in the first place, the upstream actions, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
So I see it as cosmetic. I see it as sort of Democrats acting beyond parity. They're literally funding genocide and then talking about giving us a human rights lecture at the same time. It's Trump killed parity for a bit, I thought, in politics during his administration, but now Democrats with this, it's like I'm shocked the Onion can even come up with headlines anymore, because the Democratic Party seems to be writing them unironically for them. So
yeah,
it's just a mess.
It's ironic. You can be cynical and get a chuckle out of it. But Stephen knows, my God, what we're talking about here is absolutely the worst thing in the world. Now, Stephen's on Substack, but I want to encourage people not only to go there and subscribe to his, but also Caitlin Johnstone. Follow what she has to say. And she just posted this, and it really gets to it. We don't think hard enough about what bombs are that we're paying for, the blood on our hands that we're funding, and what they do. My God, that's the whole point. what they do. Caitlin Johnstone says the new dumbest thing we've been asked to believe about this war is that Washington is powerless to stop the genocidal massacre that it is directly funding and supplying the weapons for. That is what bombs do to the human body. They rip people to pieces, they squash them with falling buildings. You see the graphics all the time, even in this open to this. You see the graphics of these buildings. My God, there are people under that. The blood and guts. It burns their flesh. It rips their guts out. They blow off body parts. They decapitate. But the public is generally sheltered from the reality of all this by the mass media, who will often just report on blasts and explosions occurring in empire targeted territories without even saying who caused them, much less detailing the damage that they inflict upon human flesh. The effect these weapons have on the human body is every bit as nightmarish as what you'd see if there was an army of psychopaths going around murdering thousands of civilians with machetes and flamethrowers. But because it's bombs, it's not getting the same kind of reaction from the general public. And that's what this support of Israel has been about. And that's what it's increasingly going to be about. And they're trying to wiggle a little talk in there about humanitarian aid, but we're talking about bombs blowing people up, Stephen, make no doubt.
Yeah, I think Caitlin hit the nail on the head there. I mean, especially because, Biden in his Oval Office address, essentially before he made that $106 billion request, he talked about Israel and the aid to Israel and aid for Ukraine and the other military spending he requested being about in the name of security, essentially being an investment in the nation's security. But after that, polling showed that people aren't really buying that in the name of the security justification. So what the White House is doing, and Biden sort of hinted that at this in his Oval Office address, is that he wants Democrats and any supportive Republicans to essentially sell this military aid as not a foreign aid thing, but as a domestic industrial policy thing, where it's like we're the arsenal of democracy. We are creating weapons that are not just good for their moral purposes, but they're also creating jobs at home. It's like that is just like next level sort of that's next level evil, to be honest with you, because you're essentially implicating working class people and saying, oh well, we need this to create jobs. Like, you don't need to arm genocide, and there are literally every other way of public investment, every other method, every other field that you invest in, whether it's clean energy or infrastructure or education or public health, every other way that the government can create jobs by direct investment is a better option, is more efficient than military spending. It's the worst way, least efficient way to create jobs. The Cost of War Project has shown this many, many times. Now, you don't get anything out of the bombs either. Like with infrastructure, you at least get a train. With clean energy, you at least have a reduction in emissions. With schools, you get happier, better teachers. With public health, you get better service. But the stuff that we're making here is designed to explode, and all of the stuff that Caitlin mentioned really rip bodies apart. So it's just a very lowest common denominator, Orwellian actually, way for the Biden administration to essentially, jiggle car keys to get our attention away from the massive destruction it's causing.
I had the great Chris Hedges on my show. Let me see if I can I turn. Well, let me see if I can show his book over there. Well, anyway, that's what he's talking about, is the horror of war. We're not talking about getting a little shot of morphine in your IV at the hospice when you check out at age 90 here. We're talking about, women and children, little bitty babies being blown apart, dying excruciating, painful deaths. We've got to let Stephen go here. I wanted to bring one of his most recent charts up on screen here and have him comment on this. And that red arrow is mine, but this was from a while back, but it's kind of indicative, or showed in early on anyway, the ratio. Now, again, we're up over 10,000 dead Palestinians from this. But this chart, I'm assuming you're going to update this or something similar to it, Stephen?
Yeah, so this data comes from OCHA, a United Nations office. And this is just through, what is that, the first 10 days? Yeah, the first 10 days of conflict where it's just killed and injured here. The the killed section here is now, by the end of the week, it will be at that probably 15,000 range for the
God.
Palestinians, while Israel's have remained the same. It's just it's honestly shocking. This is why so many people across the political spectrum want a ceasefire. Um, so you have, across all likely voters, according to one poll, that's 66%. So 2/3 of voters want a ceasefire, but only 4% of Congress has called for one. So we have a very, like, I don't even know how you say this. I mean, this is just, it's a horrible indictment of not just, values of our political leadership, but also just an indictment of our political system as well. It's supposed to be democratic, but we have, statistically one of the most out of line policies being enacted now that I can remember. And even Bernie Sanders, I mean, he's out
I
against the
know it.
ceasefire.
Yeah.
This is statistically, this is probably the most out of touch that Bernie Sanders has ever been.
Yeah, he's
And
bad
he's
and
not
getting worse,
exactly a
yeah.
perfect politician either.
No,
I mean, he's better than most, but at the same time, this is just like,
a real bad look for Bernie. Yeah, it is. And the reason I wanted to show this chart is because of the ratio. But the important thing to look at here is that this ratio is going to get much worse. This
yes,
this tower on the left is going to double here, and the Israeli casualties are not increasing. And probably even if they go in, I don't know what happens if they make this land incursion into Gaza, but they haven't really suffered any additional deaths since the first strike on October 7th, when Hamas fled the gates and went into Israel. Now, you look at that and say, how can the United States condone this, Stephen? The United States has, according to Brown University, has killed around 5 or 6 million people in the Middle East as a result of the Twin Towers in the United States. That's what's happened. 3,000 people were killed in that attack by the Saudis and those planes. So you look at this and say, how can we condone this? Well, we've done much worse. And this is going to get much worse. And we got to let him go because he's got another call coming on here. Stephen, anything you want to say in closing here? Because we're out of time, man. But I want to give you a last word for sure.
no, I would say just continue following this podcast.
Yeah.
For terrific guests, such as myself, of course. I need to brag at least once a week or self-inflate. But yeah, follow my Substack too, where you get all the graphics you need. So even if you disagree with what I'm saying, you at least get some information to use for your own purposes. So George, thank you so much. Always a pleasure to be on. And yeah, have a good day.
Yeah, follow him at Twitter for sure. That's the easiest way to get these little bits and pieces, and then you can go to the website and get the more in-depth start. But he'll have more in-depth stuff. But he'll have more coming out here very shortly. We'll talk again soon, Stephen. Stephen Semler, thanks so much.
Take care.
All right, folks, I'm going to let Stephen go here, but I wanted to continue with a couple of things here. I wanted to talk about, and I mentioned that I'm going to bring this up or try to bring it up here at the end of all of my shows, and it is the Merchants of Death War Crimes Tribunal. Now, that's coming up here very shortly. But they're just this week now. Brad Wolf is going to be in D.C. with his group and having a public witness day of action. And that's what this is showing. So he's going to come on my show Thursday. He hopes, if he's not in jail. And there's a very good likelihood that he will be, because, when I showed that graphic earlier of the bloody hands up in the air with the Code Pink action, guess what? They went to jail. So that's what has a tendency to happen here. And it may be happening with Brad Wolf. So he'll be on Thursday if he's not in jail. And if he is in jail, he'll be on Friday when he gets bailed out, I guess. And good on him for doing that. My God, because that is a pain in the arse. And not everybody is willing to go through those types of actions to bring attention and let me bring this up on screen to show you what happened this past weekend. I don't know if you saw this or not, but this is what was going on in Washington, D.C. This is amazing. so that you can see my visage again, maybe if you want to or not. Sometimes I think I'd be better off in radio. But when you see that massive crowd and you think, oh my God, I can't get to DC and be a part of that, I would like to. Well, do it in your hometown. Uh, and here's the point that I make to people: that huge crowd that you see in Washington, D.C., and sometimes like in New York, well, on an equivalency basis, if you live in Hershey, Nebraska, or Alexandria, South Dakota, or someplace like that, that crowd would be equal to you maybe being in the street with two friends. So do it, and you can say we had a crowd as big in Alexandria, South Dakota, as what they had in Alexandria, Virginia, or Washington, D.C. And I had a comment here earlier, checking in here from the great Suzanne Murphy. She'll be watching on Thursday, and she leads a lot of direct action, so she'll know what I'm talking about for sure. And the other thing, a couple of pieces of information I saw that were very interesting. I heard that there's going to be a movement to vote melon in 2024. If you, I mean, I depending on what's going to happen here. But people that are not wanting to vote for Biden, not wanting to vote for Trump, they might vote for Cornel West. They might vote melon. What's melon? Well, it's red, green, and black, the colors of Palestine, their flag, their country. And those are people that are wanting to protest, have a protest vote, not vote for any of the major candidates in the political parties anyway, although I think Cornel West would be a great choice as an independent, obviously. But that's what Vote Melon is all about. And then, of course, you can do this. This is from the Great Lee Camp, a literal rock for president of the USA 2024. Boulder, together. And I wanted to take a spin through this. I'm going to end up this way because Stephen had to leave us early here, but this is great. I had Lee Camp on about a month or so ago, and he was talking about this, the grayish brown yard rock on the issues. This is what his candidate is all about. The grayish brown yard rock has never supported a war, never will, has never supported an increase in Pentagon spending, and never will, did not support the global war on terror that has killed roughly 6 million people, did not support the invasion of Iraq, did not support the invasion of Afghanistan, did not support the invasion of Libya, has committed no war crimes, and never will, has committed no rape or sexual abuse or been accused of same, and never will. The grayish brown rock has never supported corporate tax cuts, has never supported big pharma, has never supported big ag, big oil, big banks, has never supported corporate media, has never endorsed the persecution of Julian Assange, has never endorsed the propaganda known as Russiagate, endorsed the anti-China propaganda, never will, has never supported cuts to food stamps, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, housing programs, public schools, infrastructure, or transportation, and never will, has never voted to send arms to Israel. Yeah, Yard Rock 24 has never done that, did not vote for the latest spending bill, did not support Trump's tax cuts for the rich, did not support the 2008 bank bailout, the Patriot Act, NAFTA, currently holds no assets in stock markets, no appearance on Epstein's flight logs, never endorsed a Democrat or Republican candidate, has never cooperated or supported the FBI or CIA, is not white. Remember, it's a grayish brown rock. Has never appeared on SNL, supports the efforts of wild orcas to tip over yachts. And if you can find a human being, a candidate who fits all of these criteria, then support them. Otherwise, vote Yard Rock 2024. I mean, it's funny, and he's a funny guy. We had the time today, and I wanted to bring that up on screen. But I mean, that's what we've come to. And my God, that's what we are left with. Somebody that does all they don't exist. Wait, there's no human being. It's just the Yard Rock. There's no person to vote for like that in this country. And why not? I mean, why not? Maybe there will be in my lifetime, I hope. But that's going to do it, folks. Really appreciate people tuning in today. If you like Podcast by George, I'll end by giving you the pitch. Go to podcastbygeorge.com and select the video podcast, the live streams there, where you can get it on Facebook and YouTube. And then if you like to listen to the audio only versions, you can select probably Amazon audio or Spotify. I'm not too crazy about all of either one of those. Apple Podcasts also, it's available there. A lot of places you can get the audio only versions. But folks, that's going to do it. That is going to wrap it up. That's all there is. And there ain't no more. That's another podcast by George.